Morning, everybody. So welcome to Compassionate Response to COVID-19 with my buddy. So today's topic is calm and insight. So the words, Buddhist words for calm and insight are shamatha and vipassana. So why this topic today? Well, actually, I've not covered it yet, and it's quite an important aspect of Buddhism, Buddhist theory. But the other reason is that I actually had a bit of a health scare this week. I did a 2-hour session on Tuesday, and at the end of that, it was quite a bright sunny day, and I had this visual disturbance, like a kind of migraine aura around the outside of my eye, that sort of thing. So anyway, yeah, I'd never had anything like that before, and so got in touch with the doctor, and so I've got various tests and things like that. So it does look like it's a migraine. It was a migraine, which is good. But there's an outside chance of it having been a part of a mini stroke, which is bad. So I my response to that is like, oh God, it's like quite a lot of fear, I think, came up, and just it's not yet, or something like that. Like I've got work to do and this sort of thing, So yeah, I thought it'd be good to explore this topic a bit today because it's got kind of personal relevance, and also, yeah, I haven't covered it yet really in my series of sessions. So and it's interesting, the difference between like Theravada Buddhism. So here are a load of Theravada living masters, people kind of monks, kind of highly regarded in the Theravada tradition, so the Theravada Buddhism is it's very particular in the way that it talks about the Dharma, and focuses a lot on insight, and tends to be a little bit dismissive of samatha, insight, or vipassana, and tends to be a little bit kind of maybe not exactly dismissive of samatha practice or calming practice, but very much emphasizing that you need to go beyond that to get anywhere. So I'll be sort of reviewing this from different perspectives. So hope you're well, and all lockdown drags on again still. I managed to use my pensioners bus pass yesterday and the day before. Just had a trip on the train, which is nice. Get out of the local area a little bit, and I think what I might end up doing is some sessions around coming out of lockdown, because it's almost as if like you've got, I mean, I don't know what proportion of the world's population is are kind of serious, relatively serious Buddhist practitioners, out of the 7 billion people on the planet, but it's not going to be that high a proportion. And like even serious Buddhist practitioners can struggle with isolation, being on their own for like a year. I mean, obviously there's people around, but to be in physical isolation for a year. It's like that's quite an order, really. I mean, people in my order do go on retreats, sometimes for a year, and certainly Tibetan Buddhism and all Buddhism, people do retreats like that length. But for like ordinary people, it's like to have just been cut off from their normal, familiar worlds, for this amount of time is quite a thing, really. It's quite an ask, so whenever there's any change, like even beginning the lockdown, this it's a challenge, but also coming out of it is a challenge. I mean, how are you going? How are people going to get used to the new whatever it is after this? Whatever's coming after this, or even the fact of like getting going again. With life can be a challenge when you've not been doing very much. So anyway, so I'm just saying that I probably need to speak to this a little bit from what I can say anything intelligent about it. All right, so today, we're going to do mindfulness breathing practice, and then we talk. So one of the things in Theravada Buddhism, there's something about focusing on an image, like a quiet image. So basically, I'll just say a little bit about this because then you can maybe practice it within the meditation. So it's like you begin the meditation, and you have the kind of aim of staying in touch with the breath, as the breath comes and goes. So trying to bring yourself back to the breath all the time, whenever you wander off. So the aim originally, the original aim is to kind of keep with the actual experience. But then, according to Theravada Buddhism, what can happen next is that you get something called what's called a nimitta or image. So I don't know if you've had the experience of you doing the mindfulness breathing or another meditation, and then it seems to sort of like take off or something. So it's almost like it starts to become a bit more effortless, and it's almost like there's a sense in which there's something there in the meditation, like a kind of pleasant sense of being collected around, so a sense of contentment, a sense of self-possession, that sort of thing. And it's almost like that becomes the image, or that becomes the thing that you're drawn in towards. So it's like you might begin by being aware of the breath, but then you just start to become aware of something that's actually like you collected around or something, that's more to do with your own mind, So there's something called the nimitta or acquired image or something. So according to this book, Practicing Jhanas, the process that you go through to get to the first dhyana, which is the process of absorption. So first of all, you sit, and then the nimitta, this image, this sense of collectedness, it starts up, and then it increases, and then it becomes stable, and then it becomes solid and energized. And then it says it moves towards merging with the anapana, so that anapana spot. So anapana means breathing, so it merges with the thing that you're focused on in your breath. So it moves towards that, and then it merges with it, and it becomes what's called the anapana nimitta, or the breath image. And then the anapana nimitta draws the awareness into the first dhyana. So just bear that in mind when you're meditating, that you're looking for some sort of feeling thing that you become absorbed in. That's as you sort of aware of the breath, just let yourself, if anything like that happens, let yourself become absorbed in it. So mindfulness of breathing. So we didn't do any body work, I've just realised. I was just intending to do some seated body work, so maybe focus a little bit on your breathing, on the allowing your breath to energize your system. Maybe take some deliberate, longer, deeper breaths. So, moving into the first stage of the mindfulness of breathing, just watching the breath as it comes and goes, and marking the end of the out breath with a count. So continuing to follow the breath and just marking the beginning of the in-breath with a count. So silently counting 1, breathe in, breathe out, 2, breathe in, breathe out until you get to 10. And then start again from 1. So having a sense of turning away from the world of sensations and experiences, turning towards your breath and your relationship to your breath as your source of contentment, satisfaction. Just let that happen naturally, not forcing it in any way. Just becoming absorbed, interested in the breath. So now just drop the counting and just try to be absorbed in the breath as continuously as you can. And maybe trying to be aware of, as well as the breath, of some sort of image of the breath that's in parallel with that. That's to do with your level of absorption. So now just in the fourth stage, focusing on the delicate sensations around the nose and mouth where the breath enters and leaves the body. We might think of the actual experience that we're having of the breath on the lips or nose as the breath spot, the anapana spot. And then we're trying to bring that into contact with this kind of image of, which is around our absorption and concentration, which in a way represents ourselves here in the practice. So trying to bring the two together. Ourself is absorbed in the anapana spot, the experience of the breath. And that in turn influences us, our experience of absorption. So that in a way it just becomes the breath and nothing else. There's no separation between ourselves and the experience of the breath. So in your own time, just bring your meditation to a close. Okay, so we'll start. So the topic today is samatha and vipassana, or calm and insight, and so I think most Buddhists would agree that that there are two aspects to Buddhist practice. There's the samatha aspect of practice, which is the kind of working with the mind and emotions and body and everything, so that you're, you're kind of in a positive state of mind. And so, you would sort of do loving kindness meditation, cultivating kindness towards yourself and others, other beings, all beings. You do mindfulness practice, trying to be aware of your situation, aware of your breath, aware of, what's happening in your life, what's happening for others. Try to respond appropriately, and they're the two, in a way, they're the two great kind of foundations of Buddhist practice: loving kindness on the one hand, and mindfulness on the other. And so mindfulness has been understood and promoted recently in the last couple of decades as being aware in the present moment, non-judgmentally, on purpose. This is the definition that Jon Kabat-Zinn brought about. But you could also see mindfulness as being more broadly about bringing into being what's light in terms of positive mental states, and getting rid of what's dark, negative mental states. So this is more the way that mindfulness was described in a Buddhist text called the Questions of King Milinda. So King Milinda was probably King Menander of when Alexander, the Greeks kind of, in a way, went into India with Alexander, and then you got these Greco Indian states set up, and one of them was I think it's called Bactria or something. So King Menander was a Greek king, and so a Buddhist monk called Nagasena, he was quizzing Nagasena on, well, what is Buddhist practice? How's it all work? What's mindfulness? What's concentration? All this sort of thing. So this is what Nagasena told him. It's about mindfulness is about bringing about what's skillful and getting rid of what's unskillful. So let's chuck that into the mix. And after the Buddha died, you had various meetings of the Sangha who were left behind, and you had what were called the Buddhist councils. So, and they kind of decided what the Dharma is, just clarify it and everything. And at one point, there was a split between different in the Sangha, between different groups, and one group went off to become what became Theravada Buddhism in Southeast Asia. So all the monks that you see in orange robes in Thailand and Burma and Sri Lanka are all Theravada monks. And then another branch went off and became Mahayana Buddhism. So around what's now Pakistan, that area, West Pakistan, Afghanistan, and they were more focused on so the Theravadins focus a lot on insight practice, and the Mahayanists focus more on compassion as well as insight, so as well as wisdom and compassion. So you've got these two basic kind of orientations, within Buddhism, and I've often thought. I, I think I kind of feel more convinced by the Mahayana approach, and but I'm curious also about the Theravada approach. What are they getting at? What is it that they're getting at? So it'd be a good opportunity today to explore this a bit for myself as well as for you, which is what I'm going to do. So in this book is Living Dharma, Teachings of 12 Buddhist Masters by Jack Cornfield. And a lot of the teachers in here are Theravada teachers. So here's one. This is Sunlun Sayadaw. So Sayadaw, I think, it's like a title of respect. I can't remember exactly what it means, but a lot of the Theravada teachers, and they're called Sayadaw. So I'll just read what his story a little bit, just to, it'd be quite interesting. Sunlun Sayadaw was so named because he came from the cave monasteries of Sunlun village near Myingyan in middle Burma. He was born in 1878 and was named Yu Kyo Din. That was his name. He was sent to a monastery school but learned little. At the age of 15, he entered employment as an office boy, etc. At the age of 30, he resigned from his post and returned to his native village to become a farmer. He found that his fields prospered while other fields failed. In 1919, there was an epidemic. But his fields still prospered. And there's a belief among Burmese people that if your worldly possessions rise rapidly, then you're going to die soon. So he was worried that he was going to die, because of this sudden increase in prosperity, even when everybody else is suffering. So he consulted an astrologer and was told that a two-legged being would soon leave his house, and this was tantamount to say that he would die. So he was very afraid, and so he decided to, before he died, to do one great act of charity, and erected a pavilion in front of his house and invited people to meals for 3 days. And on the third day, a certain mill clerk turned up uninvited at the feast, and they began to converse about the practice of vipassana. And on hearing these words, Kyodin became greatly affected. He couldn't sleep. He really wanted to take the practice up, vipassana meditation. But he's afraid to mention it, his wish, because he just lacked knowledge of scriptural texts. And he asked the clerk the next day if somebody who didn't know the text could practice, and he replied that practice of insight meditation didn't require doctrinal knowledge, but only deep interest and assiduity. So I think this is something what happened in the last few hundred years with Buddhism in Southeast Asia, that it became something that ordinary people started to, in fact, a lot of these Sayadaws were really just interested in teaching ordinary people. Forget maybe the whole maybe the whole connection with the scriptures got a bit kind of abstract or something, and people just felt like, oh no, I can't. It's all too complicated, you know. So there's like a grassroots movement to just bring in meditation. So you know, you can do this, you know. So this is the message that this guy's getting, you know. So the clerk taught him mindfulness breathing practice, and it says one day he met a friend who told him that directing breathing in and out alone was not sufficient. He had also to be aware of the touch of breath at the nostril tip. So that this is like the fourth stage of the mindfulness breathing, you know, where you're kind of focusing on the detail and the sensation. So, so he practiced that, and then his practice became more intense, and he became aware not only of the touch of breath at the nostril, but also the touch of his hand on the handle of the knife as he chopped corn cobs, the touch of rope on the hand as he drew water, the touch of his feet on the ground as he walked. He tried to be aware of touch in everything he did. As he tended his cattle, he would sit under a tree and practice mindfulness breathing. During the practice, he began to see coloured lights and geometrical patterns. He did not know what they were, but felt that they were the fruit of practice. This greatly encouraged him, and he began to practice more assiduously. With more intensive practice, sensations were sometimes intensely unpleasant, but they didn't deter him. He believed that they were the fruit of practice, and that if he desired to win greater fruit, he would have to overcome and get beyond them. Therefore, he generated more energy and developed a more rigorous mindfulness until he overcame the unpleasant sensations and passed beyond to the higher stages of the practice. So what you got here is, he went from being aware of the delicate sense, just practicing awareness of everything, really, you know. All sensations, you know, his hand touching the rope as he drew the water, just becoming absorbed in everything that he's experiencing, in as fully as possible. And this led to some sort of experience of seeing coloured lights and geometrical patterns. I mean, I remember being on a retreat. I've not had this experience very much, but I do remember being on a retreat at Vajraloka Retreat Centre, and in one meditation, I just had this like vision of it was a snail, you know, with a snail, but it was like made out of light, and it just felt like very vivid, and it was almost scintillating, and almost had a kind of a tactile, not tactile, but a kind of had some effect on me, both my mind and my body. And I think what this was some sort of absorbed state, and the kind of that's come from practice, from being absorbed, from being concentrated and absorbed, and it's just been thrown up by the meditation. So this sort of thing can happen in meditation. And it happens to some people more than others. I suppose it depends really what your internal architecture's like. Your the sort of mind you have and the sort of sensitivities you have. And some people are more visual, more intuitive. Some are more rational, this sort of thing. So this sort of thing arise like pleasant images and things. But then he says, with more intensive practice, sometimes he got intensively unpleasant experiences, but he with the sense that I need to get beyond this or get further. Just with my practice, I need to. He knew that he'd have to overcome and get beyond them. So he says he generated more energy and developed a more rigorous mindfulness until he overcame unpleasant sensations. So in sort of Buddhist theory, you've got something called you've got the 5 spiritual faculties. So it's like they're like a mandala. They're like a arrangement of four things with one in the middle. So in the middle you've got mindfulness in the middle, and mindfulness balances out the other two sets. So they're like in 2 sets. So you've got faith or shraddha, placing your heart upon things as one, and you've got wisdom on the other, faith and wisdom. So faith is more emotional, wisdom's more rational in a way, although there's aspects of each in both, so balancing faith with wisdom. So if you have too much faith and not enough wisdom, you kind of become gullible and will just sort of accept things that aren't reasonable. But if you've got too much wisdom, not enough faith, your practice becomes a bit dry and unemotional and analytical and that sort of thing. Maybe a bit skeptical, but you've also got the pair of samadhi or concentration on the one hand, and virya, or I call it ethical robustness. It's sometimes translated as energy in pursuit of the good, but so it is about having energy to be skillful. But I think the point is that it's like it says here, about overcoming unpleasant sensations, with more rigorous mindfulness. So it's like if every time you come across something difficult, you kind of give up or you run away or something, then you're never going to deal with those things. This is a message to myself here, because I'm quite good at running away, really. So it's you need to kind of keep coming back to facing unpleasant sensations when they arise, because they're part of life. They're part of the whole, not just the pleasant. So in the 4th dhyana, it's like the meditator in the 4th dhyana has equanimity, so they're not distracted from being skillful by either pleasant or unpleasant experience. So maybe this is partly what this is referring to. So you get pleasure in meditation, but then eventually, if you get further and further, you get equanimity. So in endeavouring in this zealous manner, you Kyodin attain the stage of stream entry. So this is where you've got enough momentum that you're going to eventually get to enlightenment. The first taste of nirvana. in mid-1920. The next month, he won the second stage of liberation, which is that's quick. Second stage of liberation, which is once returner, which I talked about in the sessions on the 10 fetters. In the third month, he won the third stage, so that's non-returner. So, it can take up to 6 years to get from stream entry to non-returner. He did it in 2 months. He asked permission of his wife to let him become a monk. After much resistance, the wife agreed. So this is interesting, isn't it? You've got somebody who's become a stream entrant and then a once returner and then a non-returner, and then he asked his wife if he could become a monk. So I think I talked about this in that session on the 10 fetters, that it's possible for a layperson to be a non-returner, but to become an arahant, you've got to be a monk. So maybe this is why he's in this story he's saying this, and in a way that by monk, what's meant here is an arahant being a monk is like saying, well, yeah, there's not going to be any kind of falling back from proper ethical practice, just. And then, so after much resistance, his wife agreed. But even then, she asked him to sow the final crop of peas before he left. But even as he was sowing the seeds, he felt a great urge to renounce the world. Setting his cattle free, put the yoke up against a tree, went to the village monastery and begged the monk there to accept him as a novice in the order. He took himself off to the caves nearby, practiced diligently, and in October 1920, he attained the final stage of freedom, arahantship. So he became enlightened, basically, in October, from mid stream entry in mid-year to October, he's enlightened. His achievement became known among the monks, and many came to test him. Though he was a barely literate man, his answers satisfied even the most learned monks. Very often they disagreed with his replies, but when his answers were checked against the text, they found many important passages in the scriptures to support his statements. So Sunlun Sayadaw was an intrinsically honest man, laconic and precise in speech, and possessed of great strength and determination. Photographs of him reveal a sturdily built man with a steady gaze, clear eyes, and a firmly set jaw. One senses in these photographs the quality of great courage, the attribute of the truly enlightened. Anyway, so they have, I suppose, like what's described there is probably like a typical story of a Theravada master, maybe kind of coming from a simple background, the kind of I mean, what he was motivated a lot there was fear, wasn't it? It's like he thought that, you know, he took on the sort of the superstition that if you know he was going to die, if he's really prospering a lot very quickly, you know. So that motivated him to want to practice, you know, intensively to overcome his fear. So so I think one thing that I kind of wonder a bit is this practice of like absorbing oneself in meditation, in like particularly in mindfulness practice, you know, like you know, there, you know, it's like the detail in the breath, and then the detail in all the sensations that you're experiencing, just really staying with whatever is there, you know, like what Theravada practice is often about is like naming things. You know, there's, you know, I'm raising my hand, I'm reaching for something, I'm picking it up, I'm drinking the tea. So it's like a kind of continuous awareness of what's happening. And then, so this kind of concentration in a way is what's being identified with as samatha, you know, as calming meditation. So I suppose like you kind of learn to just stay calm with whatever your experience is, you know, whether you're walking up and down, you just stay calm, whether you're talking to somebody, you know, you stay calm, stay mindful. But you know, Theravada Buddhists, you know, teachers talk about, you know, this is not enough. You know, what you need to do is to sort of see the impermanent nature of all that phenomena, and kind of and therefore let go of it. You know, let go of your own. You know, need to continue existing, you know, or a need to do anything or be anything particular. So I mean, I did a number of retreats in the 2000s at a temple in London called the Buddha Temple, and it was like, you know, it was there were Thai monks there leading everything, and I went mainly partly out of curiosity, you know, just to see what what that sort of Buddhism was like, you know, partly because I didn't have any money and it was cheap, like £50 for a week or something. And what the practice, and this was a practice for lay people. So even though I was ordained in Triratna tradition, I went with a friend, and we were both order members, but we just went, you know, we acted as lay people and all that. So what the practice was all about was like, you get up at 5:30 in the morning, and then start practicing. So there'd be a beautiful temple, and then underneath the temple there'd be like a meditation hall, which was kind of, if it was in Thailand, it'd be quite cool because it was like a little bit underground sort of thing. And you just, well, you did some chanting to start with, and often you would do the Karaniya Metta Sutta, loving kindness sutta, might be one of the things that you chanted. But then all the practice was either one of two things. It was either slow walking meditation, and I mean slow, I mean sort of, lifting your feet, your foot, moving it, putting it down, being aware of the sensations in your foot, lifting the other foot, moving, It's like you walk up and down and back again in the room, and everyone's doing the same thing, just slowly. And then you would, maybe do that for like half an hour or something, and then you'd sit in meditation and just watch your abdomen rising and falling. And there wasn't a lot of training in how to sit or meditation posture, or anything around that. It was just that was it. You're just given these instructions and just get on with it. So people would sit in all sorts of awful postures and in a way kind of sort of try and like force themselves to just sit there. And so there's some benefit to that, which is that you develop robustness or something, But I think there's also something missing there as well, because it's like you need to be being sensitive to yourself and to your body and everything. So you do these alternating walking meditation, sitting meditation, and then maybe it'd be like for 3 hours or something, that whole slot. And then you'd have a break, and maybe a tea break or something like that, and then you come back, do another like 3 hour block, and then you might have your lunch, and then there might be a bit of free time in the afternoon, and then you have more of it. So it's like a lot of practice, a lot of just, in a way, trying to be absorbed in your experience of walking or mindfulness of breathing. There's a book by Andrew Skilton called History of Buddhist History or something. It's a history of Buddhism, basically. I can't remember the title exactly now. Concise History of Buddhism, I think it is. And he talks about how the Theravada de-emphasize loving kindness meditation. So I can only say what I've experienced. I mean, there wasn't, apart from chanting the sutta, there wasn't any loving kindness meditation at all, taught there. So I just kind of wonder about that, really. Like, does it does loving kindness come about naturally through just practicing mindfulness of your body and mindfulness of your movements and mindfulness of because the thing is, what you're aiming at here is this absorption, first dhyana, second dhyana, and all that sort of thing. But the conditions for getting into the first dhyana are, well, it's in the description of it. It says in seclusion from. You're in the first dhyana if your mental states are in seclusion from unskillful mental states and sensuality. So you're not interested in the world outside as a sensation, as a refuge. Things experiences, having things around you, you've let go of all of that, and you're just focusing on your meditation practice, absorption into your meditation practice. So you kind of going for refuge from the world and from unskillful mental states. So by definition, it's not possible to be in the dhyanas if you have any sort of negative mental states. So it's not possible to be in the dhyana if you have aversion to something, if you have aversion to somebody else, or you find somebody difficult, or whatever it is, So it seems to be that loving kindness is implied in dhyana, in being in the dhyanas. So I just wonder how that fits, with Theravada Buddhism, and what you find, when you sort of see in the temple. It was a Thai temple that, they had this sort of images of the king everywhere, king of Thailand, but they had all these images of Theravada kind of Buddhist masters and stuff, and a lot of them just had these like really kind of sort of furrowed brows, like just really intensively, like almost like kind of grumpy old men, like this kind of intense concentration. I think so. From Sangharakshita's viewpoint, Theravada Buddhism is Hinayana, or don't call it Hinayana these days. Nikaya Buddhism. It kind of focuses a lot on like renunciation and letting go of the world, this sort of thing. Whereas Mahayana Buddhism focuses on helping the world. So in a way, I think the Theravada practice feels a bit like kind of you're just kind of withdrawing into yourself, and you develop techniques of being kind of absorbed in your experience, and in a way, maybe you then get these like signs, these kind of experiences, which make you think that you kind of, you feel all right. You feel sort of like insulated from the world, You kind of see that you're in touch. You're in touch with all of that, your experience you're having through mindfulness, but you're not looking for anything beyond it. You're not craving anything beyond it. But you're also seeing that it's impermanent, so you're not being attached to it. So and then what you do if you were, became a master like Sayadaw, you would then teach the same thing to other people, and that would be your aspect of of compassion, from a Theravada point of view. Sangharakshita has talked about this, but he was a Theravada monk, and he found that it didn't really satisfy it satisfies his mindfulness practice, but it didn't really satisfy his desire for something for his emotions to respond to. So there is a sense of which the kind of can feel a bit like a kind of cutting off of emotions or something, positive emotions, so moving towards people in a kind of encouraging kind of way. So what does Sangharakshita say about samatha and vipassana? He says in his own teaching, Sangharakshita follows basic Buddhist tradition in dividing meditation into two broad types: samatha, shamatha, which is Sanskrit, Pali samatha, or tranquility, and vipassana in Sanskrit, or vipassana in Pali, insight. He says samatha prepares samatha prepares the mind by purifying, integrating, and refining it. So it's purifying, integrating, and refining it, while vipassana is the application of the mind made subtle and concentrated by samatha to perceiving the true nature of reality. Thus, one's spiritual career commences with developing the basis for the penetration of truth. So the basis for the penetration of truth is samatha, or calming meditation. And then once that penetration has taken place, so you've got a bit of insight, then your task is to deepen and extend it, so that every corner of your being is illuminated by it. So Sangharakshita talks about samatha as having two phases. So there's concentration, which is a narrowing of the focus of attention and unification of energy. And you can have a horizontal and a vertical integration. So the vertical one being integration with something higher. And then he says so he talks about concentration as one phase, and then absorption is the other phase. So this is when you're getting into the dhyanas. So you kind of that's what he says. Okay, and then I've got something from Rupert Gethin, who's well-known Pali scholar. Well, if he was the president of the Pali Text Society, this is his book, Foundations of Buddhism. So he's talking about the relationship of calm and insight. He says, we have seen how developed Buddhist theory envisages two basic possibilities as far as meditation is concerned. In the first place, by the practice of calm meditation, one abandons the gross for the sake of the subtle. That is, by seeing certain experiences as disturbing, the mind seeks peace in the subtler and subtler experience of the dhyanas. This has the effect of weakening attachment to experiences tied up with the world of the five senses. So the gross is, we talk about the gross here as the world of the sense, the world of desire for sensual things, and the subtler is more the dhyanas, so the pleasure that you get in meditation. It says, but in subtler experiences, there lurk subtler attachments which may not be recognized for what they are. So it's like, we can get attached to the experience of meditation, experiences in meditation. I suppose like the Theravada masters would sort of see that and want to kind of go beyond it, So hence the thing about moving through painful experiences as well. So it says, so although defilements are controlled, they are not rooted out. And then in the second place, this is insight. By the practice of insight meditation, one sees experiences as inherently flawed because of the characteristics of impermanent suffering and no self. And so instead of letting go of the gross merely to grasp at the subtle, one lets go of them completely. So you let go of attachment to anything, because to the extent that it's not permanent, that it's impermanent and isn't going to satisfy you in the end. In this unqualified letting go of the conditioned, one experiences the unconditioned nirvana. In practice, in order to see things as inherently characterized by impermanence, suffering, and no self, one's mind must be clear and undisturbed. So this is dhyana, clear and undisturbed. So he says, although the theoretical position of the classical meditation manual seems basically clear, meaning you've got like calming and insight meditation, and they're bound up together. The precise relationship of calm meditation and insight meditation is a live issue for both contemporary historical scholarship and contemporary Theravada practice. Within contemporary Theravada practice, there's a broad movement of insight meditation that has had considerable influence in the West. The tendency of this movement is to take the view that since the dhyanas are only impermanent, relatively pleasant states, the meditator should not strive to attain dhyana, but aim at developing insight from the outset. Moreover, there's a Buddhist tradition of seeing the highest understanding of other religions as based on misinterpreting dhyana experiences. From this perspective, the dhyanas can thus be seen as, in a sense, not characteristically Buddhist, since they can be attained in the absence of the liberating insight which brings direct knowledge of nirvana. So, I really disagree with this. This idea that the dhyanas can just be pleasant experiences from other religious traditions. So the point behind the jhanas is that they're specifically Buddhist. The jhanas of form are about skillfulness. So skillfulness is a kind of specific Buddhist concept. It's what actually brings happiness about. The actions that actually bring happiness about are called skillful, and those that don't are called unskillful. So there's nothing other than that in a way. So when you get into the dhyanas, you're actually being skillful, and in a Buddhist sense, and I think that the Buddha actually invented the dhyanas. Prior to him, you had the Vedic system. They had the Jains and other religious groups, and they were teaching something totally different. They weren't teaching skillfulness; they were teaching something different. So yeah. So you've got this contemporary Theravada practice, which is saying you don't need to practice the dhyanas. In fact, there's a danger of practicing the dhyanas because, you get this kind of seductive, pleasurable experience, which you can then think you've got somewhere. So this comes from the Brahmajala Sutta, I think, which is the Buddhist scripture on wrong views. So it's like some of the wrong views you can have is like, things like thinking that because you're in the first dhyana, a state of concentration, you're enlightened, or any other dhyana, so it's like it's like having a wrong view about what your experience is, So they're talking these certain contemporary Theravada movements are talking about just go for insight from the outset, so just go for seeing into the impermanent nature of things. But if and maybe that retreat was influenced strongly by that, like just keep looking, be mindful of yourself walking up and down, just keep looking, trying to see the impermanent nature of things. But if that's the case, then in a way, it's kind of you're avoiding something which is like really central to Buddhism, which is like what's skillful, what's unskillful. What's sitting there and working on your attitude towards yourself and others through the metta bhavana. You're not doing that, So I suppose there's a danger that you just become quite absorbed in your, how am I getting on with my insight? This sort of idea. It was like in Mahayana Buddhism, you've got the idea of the Bodhisattva ideal, where you're thinking, how's everybody? How is the world getting on with life? How can I help it? What does it need? So you've got all the hands of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, reaching out to give people what they need. So yes, I think. What's happened in Triratna over the years is that various people have gotten interested in, had an interest in, say, Theravada Buddhism or in things like Dzogchen or whatever it is, and have kind of emphasize certain things. And I think while it's fine to have kind of certain interests, or preferences in a way, within Buddhism, eventually, I think the Buddha said, how can you tell that something's my teaching? And he says, well, it's got to have the Noble Eightfold Path in it, So it's like you've got to work on cultivating positive emotion. That's one of the perfections. But actually, in Theravada Buddhism, I think they call it something like right resolve. So it's more like a kind of a same thing. It's like this sort of keep pointing towards, maybe in a little bit slightly willful sort of way towards insight, But you've got to have perfect ethics in there. You've got to have perfect livelihood, so that your life is actually bringing happiness to others, yourself and others. So it's like, So you've got this idea of like, I think what often happens is like people, they're looking for quick fix, they're looking for the shortcut and stuff. And they get a bit of experience of something and they get really excited and think, oh, this is it, So it's like there's always this danger of reductionism, you get it with with science, things get reduced to how is this useful sort of technologically or something, and what people forget is like it's not about having a certain tools in life, you've always got the thing of like how are you going to use them, or are you going to use them, or is it ethical to use them, is it ethical to so I suppose you can apply this to meditation itself, is it in the way that you practice mindfulness, does this actually is this actually of benefit to the world, or am I just getting some sort of relief from suffering for myself, this sort of thing? I don't know. So yeah, Rupert Gethin, he says that commenting on this idea that the jhanas are not Buddhist, since they can be attained in the absence of the liberating insight which brings direct knowledge of nirvana. He says at the academic level, this kind of thinking is reflected in an authoritative modern scholarly treatment of Theravada meditation by Winston King that presents the dhyanas as taken over by the Buddhist tradition from pre-existing Indian Brahminical yogic practices. What Buddhism added was the practice of insight meditation. So it's sort of saying, yeah, insight is Buddhist and dhyanas are not Buddhist. I just think that's nonsense, So it seems like the idea that you can it's called dry insight. You can attain nirvana without going through the dhyanas. It seems like that was a kind of quite a sort of a specific movement in a way. But Gethin says that the later manuals all agree that the meditator needs both samatha and vipassana, and that the culmination of the path consists in a meditation attainment that consists in the coming together of calm and insight. So you get a bit of a tension between people who emphasize dhyana and people who emphasize insight, and he says that this comes about in other parts of Buddhism, where, say, in Mahayana Buddhism, you've got people that emphasize emptiness and people that emphasize, meditation. And the same in Tibetan Buddhism. Glugpa, emphasis on analytical meditation on emptiness. Nyingma, practice of Dzogchen, this sort of thing. So I think, just to summarize here a bit, and maybe my main point, it's that while people may have preferences, so it's a bit like, my preference is for, I feel most comfortable with ideas, like I'm giving out lots of ideas every week. I enjoy swimming in the world of ideas, and developing clarity and this sort of thing. I'm also kind of more comfortable in a Buddhism where some of the needs that I didn't have met before are met. So for instance, a Buddhism where loving kindness is emphasized, so it means that I emphasize it towards myself and towards my own practice, and that makes me happier. So these are my main two preferences and areas of kind of where I feel happier. But it might be that other people don't have the same preferences or needs, and maybe some people just really are comfortable, more comfortable when, in the absence of concepts, in the absence of ideas, and maybe in the absence of ethical imperatives and things like that. They might think, oh, I can't stand all of that. What I want is to just be absorbed in my breath, or in mindfulness practice, and they experience a sense of relief from that, so from suffering, from their own particular suffering. But I think ultimately, if we're talking about overcoming all suffering for ourselves, it's not just about me doing what I like doing and just stopping with that, and similarly with other people, it's not about them just doing what they like doing, stopping with that. I think in the end, there's got this broad development of the human being across the board, so that so that there's calm and there's insight. There's what you like there in your experience, but there's also that you're also working on accommodating the things that you don't like so much. So I think, these different aspects of Buddhism are all pointing to just different aspects of being human, really, and different tendencies, And yeah, so they're probably worth seeing like that. And so calm and insight, both there in the mix. Both need to be there in some way or other. I hope that's been interesting for you anyway, and I think I'll wind it up there. Thanks a lot.